Blood dripped across a $47 million floor as a 9-year-old girl whispered the 7 words that detonated a Mafia empire. 2 men collapsed. A dynasty cracked. And the only person who saw the truth was the child they all overlooked. She turned, ready to run. But the boss leaned in with a question that froze her pulse. Who told you what you saw was a mistake? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you do not want to miss it. Now, back to our story. At 8:47 p.m. on a stormlit Wednesday, inside a $47 million Manhattan penthouse, a 9-year-old whispered 7 words to a Sicilian mafia boss. 48 hours later, 2 men lay bleeding. A fortune in shattered baccarat glass sparkled under blue police lights, and federal agents dragged half the Ferraro family out in handcuffs. Her name was Cecilia, and all she said was, "They are liars and thieves." This isn't a story about crime. It's about how a child with nothing but her memory upended a dynasty built on blood and silence. By the end, you'll understand why 847 families call this girl a guardian angel, or a curse. A courtroom, silent except for the word guilty. 40 people gathered around a gravestone, weeping and clapping at once. The mafia boss alone, tears in his eyes, tearing apart a faded photograph. But this story isn't what you think it is. Before we get to the verdict, you need to know about the 3 rules Cecilia's mother drilled into her every morning. Never look too long. Never let them see you remember. Never speak first, and never speak last. 72 hours before the raid, Cecilia wiped fingerprints from a $90,000 glass table and watched shadows flicker in mirrored marble. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be invisible in a house where the wrong look gets you erased, imagine every second as a coin toss. Heads, you see nothing. Tails, you see too much. What no one understood yet. In 3 days, this silent servant's daughter would see everything. And for the first time in her life, keeping quiet could get her mother killed. Would you risk everything to expose the truth? Drop your answer in the comments, because one lie in this house could cost you your life. 72 hours before the raid, Cecilia woke at 5:47 a.m. to find her mother already dressed, staring at their single cracked window like it might offer escape. "Emergency meeting," Astrid whispered. "Coffee by 9. Don't look at anyone." While most mothers taught daughters to dream big, Astrid taught survival. How to polish $90,000 Italian glass without leaving prints. How to read a room's danger level by counting exits. How to become so invisible that even killers forgot you existed. But invisibility came at a cost. 3 years earlier, Astrid had been drowning. $47,000 in medical debt after Cecilia's emergency surgery. Collections calling hourly. Eviction notices piling up. Then a man in a charcoal suit appeared at her diner shift with an offer. Work as housekeeper for the Torrisi family. Earn triple her salary. Ask 0 questions. She knew what Torrisi meant. She took the job anyway. By 9 years old, Cecilia had memorized every tell. Giuliano's hand drifting to his left ankle before violence. Marco's smile widening microseconds before betrayal. The smell of bleach that meant someone had been disappeared overnight. She cataloged these details like other kids memorized multiplication tables. Except her mistakes didn't earn bad grades. They earned shallow graves. That Wednesday morning felt different. Heavier. Like the 30 seconds before lightning strikes, when every hair stands up and birds stop singing. Astrid handed Cecilia the silver espresso tray at 8:58 a.m. "Remember, your furniture. Furniture doesn't have eyes. But furniture doesn't notice when the underboss nods approval at his nephew swapping folders. Furniture doesn't understand that some secrets kill witnesses just for breathing the same air." What Astrid didn't know, what would destroy her when she found out, was that Cecilia had inherited her mother's survival instinct and something far more dangerous, a photographic memory that recorded everything. Comment invisible if you've ever had to hide who you really are to survive, because in 2 minutes, Cecilia's invisibility is about to shatter, and Marco's already planning what to do when it does. At 9:02 a.m., Cecilia pushed open the mahogany door to Domenico's office and stepped into a room where 3 predators waited. Domenico Teresi sat behind a desk carved from a single block of Italian walnut, worth more than Astrid's entire medical debt. Steel-gray eyes tracked Cecilia's entrance like a hawk watching prey. He never blinked first. Ever. To his left, Giuliano Calabrese, underboss for 23 years, a man who'd earned his position by burying 17 rivals in concrete foundations across 3 states. His left hand rested on his knee, inches from the ankle where Cecilia knew the knife lived. Right now, that hand was relaxed. That wouldn't last. To his right, Marco Teresi, the nephew, the Harvard-educated consigliere who quoted Dante while authorizing executions. 34 years old, custom Armani, a smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials, and dead eyes that belonged in morgues. 2 soldati stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. 47 stories of power and violence condensed into 1,600 square feet of marble and leather. Cecilia's hands didn't shake as she set down the tray. 3 years of training. Furniture doesn't have tremors. Grazie, piccola, Domenico said. His voice sounded like gravel wrapped in silk. She nodded, eyes down, turning to leave. That's when Marco moved. He slid a folder across the glass table. Crimson label, wax seal embossed with a family crest, thick as a Bible. Cecilia caught the motion in her peripheral vision. Domenico reached for it, examining the seal. The soldati turned toward the window, discussing something about shipments. For seconds, that's all Marco needed. His hand disappeared beneath his jacket, emerged with an identical folder. Same crimson label, same wax seal, different contents. He swapped them so smoothly that even Giuliano, sitting 3 feet away, would have missed it. But Cecilia didn't miss it. Photographic memory doesn't blink. And then, worse, she saw Giuliano's barely perceptible nod. Approval. Conspiracy. Marco's eyes snapped to hers. Time froze. He knew. She knew. They both knew. Have you ever locked eyes with someone who could erase you with a phone call? That's the moment Cecilia's invisibility died, and her countdown to survival began. 2 questions now stalked her. What was in those folders? And how long did she have before Marco made her disappear? Cecilia's legs carried her out of that office on autopilot. Muscle memory from 3 years of practiced invisibility. But inside, her mind screamed. He saw me watching. He knows I saw. She made it to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. The silver tray clattered against the marble counter. Too loud, too obvious. Another housekeeper, Teresa, glanced over with concern. You okay, honey? Fine. The lie tasted like copper. Like fear. Through the doorway, she could see Marco emerging from Domenico's office, phone already pressed to his ear. His eyes swept the hallway, calculating, measuring, deciding. When his gaze landed on Cecilia, she looked away. Too late. The damage was done. But here's what Cecilia didn't know. Marco had been planning this folder swap for 14 months. And in his contingency plans, there was a protocol for witnesses, especially small, powerless ones who couldn't fight back. The penthouse felt different now. Smaller. Every hallway a trap. Every closed door a threat. Cecilia moved through her afternoon duties like a ghost haunting her own life. Folding laundry that might be her last. Wiping counters she might never see again. At 2:17 p.m., she overheard Marco on a phone call, speaking rapid Italian. She caught 3 words. Bambina. Problema. Stasera. Tonight. Her chest tightened. Air became scarce. By 4 p.m., the penthouse staff noticed a shift. Conversations dropped to whispers. The soldati moved differently. Less relaxed, more tactical. Something was happening. Something always happened when Marco looked nervous. Cecilia found her mother in the laundry room, folding silk sheets worth more than their monthly rent. Mama. Her voice cracked. Astrid looked up, saw her daughter's pale face, trembling hands, and knew. Mothers always know. What did you see? The question hung between them like a noose. Cecilia whispered what she'd witnessed. The folders, the swap, Giuliano's nod, Marco's eyes. Each word felt like signing their death warrants in real time. Astrid's face drained of color. For 3 years, she kept them safe by being invisible, obedient, forgettable. Now her daughter had become the most dangerous thing in a house full of killers, a witness with a perfect memory. They're going to hurt us, aren't they?" Cecilia's voice was small, childlike, the 9-year-old finally breaking through the survival training. Astrid pulled her close, feeling her daughter's heartbeat thundering against her ribs. She wanted a lie, to promise safety, to be the mother who fixed everything. But in the Teresi household, lies were mercy, and truth was a death sentence. "I don't know, baby, but we need to be smart. Smarter than we've ever been. Comment run if you think they should flee, or stay if you think running makes them targets. Because in 8 hours, their choice will determine who lives and who disappears into the New Jersey Pine Barrens. And Marco's already dialing the number that will seal their fate." Cecilia didn't sleep that night. Neither did Astrid. They lay in their cramped servants' quarters, listening to footsteps in hallways, car engines in the street below, every sound a potential threat. At 11:43 p.m., Cecilia heard Marco's voice through the wall, low, controlled, dangerous. She pressed her ear to the plaster. "Can't have loose ends," the girl saw. "Giuliano agrees. Tomorrow morning." Her blood turned to ice. Dawn came too fast. At 7:12 a.m., the penthouse intercom crackled to life. Marco's voice, smooth as poison. "All household staff report to the main hall immediately. No exceptions." Astrid grabbed Cecilia's hand. Her palm was slick with sweat. 15 staff members lined up like suspects. Housekeepers, chefs, drivers, gardeners. The soldati stood behind them, 2 at each exit, hands resting near concealed weapons. This wasn't a meeting. This was an interrogation. Marco paced before them, every inch the prosecutor. "Sensitive documents have been compromised. Until we identify the breach, no one leaves this property. Phones will be confiscated. Rooms will be searched. Cooperation is mandatory." He paused, letting the threat sink in. Failure to cooperate will be interpreted as guilt. One by one, phones were collected. Cecilia watched as lifelines to the outside world disappeared into a lockbox. They were trapped, isolated, prey in a cage with predators circling. The interrogations began at 8 a.m. Domenico's office became a confessional, except no sins were forgiven here. Each staff member entered alone, emerged shaken. Vincent, the driver, came out pale and sweating. Rosa, the head chef, exited with red-rimmed eyes. Whatever questions they were asking, whatever pressure they were applying, it was breaking people. But what none of them knew, what would change everything, was that Domenico had been planning his own move. And Cecilia's whispered observation was about to become the match that ignited his counterstrike. At 10:47 a.m., Astrid was called in. She squeezed Cecilia's hand once, a silent goodbye, just in case, and walked into that office. 47 minutes passed. Cecilia counted every second, every breath, every worst-case scenario. Around her, staff whispered theories. Someone stole money. Someone talked to police. Someone was about to die. They had no idea the real target was a 9-year-old girl who'd seen too much. When Astrid finally emerged, her face was a mask, carefully blank, deliberately neutral. But her eyes screamed terror. She didn't look at Cecilia. Couldn't. Because if she did, she'd break. Then Marco appeared at Cecilia's elbow, his smile a weapon. "Your turn, Piccola. The boss wants to see you. Alone. Have you ever walked towards something you knew might destroy you? Comment below if you face your worst fear. Because Cecilia's about to face a man who's buried children for far less than what she knows. And in that office, furniture doesn't get to stay silent. The walk to Domenico's office felt like death row. 43 steps, each one heavier than the last. Cecilia's shoes made soft clicks against Italian marble, counting down seconds until her world either ended or exploded. Marco opened the door, just her inside, closed it behind her with a finality that sounded like a tuned ceiling. Domenico sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, face carved from stone. The city sprawled behind him through floor-to-ceiling glass. Millions of people living normal lives while Cecilia bargained for hers. Sit, not a request. She sat. The leather chair swallowed her small frame. Her feet didn't touch the ground. 23 seconds of silence. He was testing her, watching for cracks. Cecilia. Her name sounded like a verdict. Beautiful name. Do you know what it means? Blind, sir. Her voice barely whispered. Blind. He let the word hang. Ironic, isn't it? Because you see everything in this house, don't you? Her throat closed. Yesterday morning, you brought us coffee. Do you remember what you saw? Nothing, sir. Nothing. He leaned forward. You were in that room for 97 seconds. You're telling me in 97 seconds, you saw nothing? He counted. He timed her. This was a trap 3 years in the making. I just served coffee, sir. But Domenico already knew she was lying, because 3 hours earlier, he'd reviewed security footage. The cameras didn't capture the folder swap. Marco had planned the angle perfectly. But they did capture something else. Cecilia's eyes tracking the movement, her body language shifting from routine to alert. She'd seen something. The question was whether she understood what it meant. Marco tells me you were staring at the table. Ice flooded her veins. Marco had reported her. The setup was complete. I wasn't, sir. I promise. Promises. Domenico's voice dropped to a whisper, the most dangerous volume in this house. Do you know what happens to liars here, Piccola? She nodded. She'd scrubbed the evidence. Then I'll ask you one more time, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. What? Did you see? Cecilia's mind raced. Option 1. Lie. He knows she dies. Option 2. Tell truth. Marco kills her, she dies. Option 3. Something insane, something impossible, something that might create a third path. Her mother's voice echoed. Be smart. Smarter than we've ever been. Cecilia stood. Her legs shook but held. She walked around the desk, soldati tense by the door, hands moving toward weapons, and leaned close to Domenico's ear. Close enough to smell his cologne. Close enough to feel danger radiating off him like heat. She whispered 7 words that would shatter his empire. They are liars and thieves. She didn't name names. Didn't explain. Let him interpret. Let him hunt. Domenico's face remained stone. But something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise. Calculation. Maybe even respect. He waved his hand. Dismissal. Cecilia walked out on trembling legs, having no idea whether she just saved her life or signed her own death warrant. But in that moment, something shifted. The prey had just shown her teeth. Behind closed doors, Domenico picked up his phone and made 3 calls that would end an empire. What Cecilia didn't know, she just triggered the deadliest game of chess the Teresi family had ever seen. And she was the queen no one saw coming. While Cecilia walked back to the kitchen, hands still shaking from her gamble, Astrid was in the servants' bathroom, staring at her reflection and making an impossible decision. Her phone, the one she'd hidden in a tampon box, the one Marco's search hadn't found, buzzed silently. Unknown number. Status report. Now, Astrid's fingers hovered over the keypad. 3 years of lies. 3 years of living a double life that could get her daughter killed. She typed, compromised. Daughter witness swap. Teresi knows something. Need extraction. The response came in seconds. Negative. Mission incomplete. Maintain cover. Her hands clenched. Federal handlers didn't care about Cecilia's safety. They cared about convictions, about taking down the Teresi syndicate, about headlines and career advancements. Her daughter was acceptable collateral damage. 3 years earlier. Mrs. Novak, we need your help. The FBI agent had approached her in the hospital cafeteria, right after Cecilia's surgery, right when the $47,000 bill had destroyed any hope of financial survival. He was young, ambitious, wearing a suit that cost more than her car. We've been trying to infiltrate the Teresi household for 2 years. We need someone on the inside, someone they'd never suspect. I'm a waitress. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I can't. You're $47,000 in debt. Collections agencies are circling. In 6 months, you'll be homeless. He slid a folder across the table. Work for us. 3 years maximum. We pay off your debt, provide monthly stipend, guarantee witness protection when it's done. All you do is clean their house and report anything suspicious. Astrid had stared at that folder, at the promise of survival, at the guarantee of feeding her daughter, at the cost of betraying people who would murder her without hesitation if they found out. She'd signed. Present day. Now, 3 years later, she was FBI informant codenamed Sparrow, and her daughter had just become the most valuable and most endangered witness in the operation. She deleted the text thread, flushed the phone SIM card, made her choice. Screw the mission. I'm saving my daughter. But when she exited the bathroom, Marco was waiting in the hallway, just standing there, smiling that dead-eyed smile. "Astrid, we need to talk." Her blood froze. About what? About loyalty. He stepped closer. About what happens to people who forget where their loyalties lie. He knew. Somehow impossibly he knew. And as federal training kicked in, assessing exits, counting threats, calculating survival odds, Astrid realized something that turned her stomach. Cecilia had saved them both by whispering to Domenico. Because if Marco was investigating Astrid, it meant Domenico was investigating Marco. The house had become a minefield, and they were all standing on pressure plates. Comment Astrid if you think she's a hero, or traitor if you think she endangered her daughter. Because in 12 hours, her secret will detonate, and the line between hero and traitor will blur beyond recognition. The clock is ticking. Marco's closing in, and Cecilia just gave Domenico the ammunition to start a war. While Astrid faced Marco in that hallway, Domenico sat alone in his office, staring at the two folders on his desk, the real one, and the fake one Marco thought he delivered. Because Domenico Teresi hadn't survived 43 years in this business by trusting anyone, not even blood. The moment Cecilia whispered, "liars and thieves," he'd known. His nephew, his underboss, both. He opened the switch folder first. Inside, a will. His will. Except the signatures were wrong, forged by someone who understood estate law, but not his actual handwriting. The document transferred 80% of his American territories to Marco and Giuliano upon his accidental death. Accidental. The word tasted like poison. He pulled out his phone, photographed every page, then opened the real folder. His legitimate will, distributing power among 5 capos, ensuring no single successor could consolidate control. The way it should be. The way that prevented civil wars. Someone knocked. Domenico closed both folders, slid them into his desk drawer. Enter. His head of security, Salvatore, loyal for 31 years, the only man Domenico still trusted. "Run these." Domenico handed him the photos. Handwriting analysis, signature verification, document dating. "I want to know when this forgery was created and who touched it." Salvatore's face remained neutral, but his eyes understood. Betrayal at the highest level. How long? 4 hours. Maybe less. But what Domenico didn't tell Salvatore, what he couldn't tell anyone yet, was that he'd already made 3 phone calls. One to his forensic accountant, one to his lawyer, and one to a contact at the FBI who owed him a favor from 1987. Because if Marco and Giuliano had planned this, they planned his murder too. And Domenico needed evidence before he struck. Otherwise, the family would fracture into civil war, and 200 people would die in the crossfire. At 2:34 p.m., Salvatore returned with results that confirmed Domenico's worst fears. The forgery was created 14 months ago. The paper stock matched documents from Marco's law office, and Giuliano's fingerprints were on pages 3, 7, and 12. 14 months of planning. 14 months of smiling at family dinners while plotting his murder. Domenico's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Teresi, this is Special Agent Rebecca Gaines, FBI. I believe we have a mutual problem." The trap was set. The pieces were moving. And Cecilia's whisper had just armed the most dangerous man in New York. Comment fire if you think Domenico should strike immediately, or wait if you think he should wait and gather more evidence, because his next move will determine who lives and who gets buried in the Pine Barrens. Marco Teresi stood in the marble hallway, watching Astrid's face drain of color, and knew he'd miscalculated. The housekeeper wasn't just scared. She was trained scared. The kind of fear that came with protocols and contingency plans. FBI, DA, didn't matter. She was a plant. Loyalty, he repeated, stepping closer. It's everything in this family. Without it, people become expendable. Astrid's hand moved slightly toward her pocket. Instinct, reflex, then stopped. But Marco caught it. Whatever she'd hidden, there was important enough to risk exposure. "I'm loyal," she whispered. "I've worked here 3 years. Never caused problems." Exactly. 3 years. Right when the feds ramped up their investigation. He smiled. Convenient timing. Her eyes widened. Confirmation. Marco pulled out his phone. Typed quickly. Housekeeper compromised. Recommend immediate action. Daughter, maybe leverage. Giuliano's response came in seconds. Agreed. Dinner. Make it public. But what Marco didn't know, what would destroy him, was that Domenico had been monitoring all internal communications for 6 weeks. Every text Marco sent, Domenico saw. Every call Marco made, Domenico recorded. The moment Cecilia whispered her warning, Domenico had activated surveillance protocols that Marco didn't even know existed. Marco turned back to Astrid. Tonight, 7 p.m. Family dinner. Attendance is mandatory for all staff. What's happening tonight? Truth. Marco's smile widened. We're going to find out who's been lying to us. And Cecilia needs to be there. Front and center. Astrid's composure cracked. She's 9. She has nothing to do with. She has everything to do with it. Because she saw something yesterday morning that she shouldn't have seen. And now she's going to help us understand who's been talking to the feds. He walked away, leaving Astrid frozen in the hallway, her mind racing through impossible calculations. Marco's plan, frame Astrid publicly at dinner, force Cecilia to testify against her mother, eliminate both witnesses, blame everything on the FBI informant. Clean, efficient, no loose ends. But he'd made one catastrophic error. He assumed Domenico believed him. At 4:17 p.m., Marco met Giuliano in the garage, the only place without cameras, or so they thought. The boss is acting strange, Giuliano muttered. He's been making calls, closed-door meetings. The girl talked to him. We need to move tonight before he figures out the extent of it. And if he already knows. Marco's jaw tightened. Then we execute Plan B. Plan B. Kill Domenico at dinner. Blame it on the FBI informant trying to assassinate him. Take control in the chaos. The coup accelerated by necessity. Neither man noticed the micro-camera installed in the garage's sprinkler system 3 weeks ago. Domenico watched the footage from his office, Salvatore standing behind him. They're planning to kill you tonight. I know. Domenico's voice was ice. Let them think they have the upper hand. I want them confident, comfortable, exposed. He picked up his phone, dialed a number that connected to a federal task force that had been building a case for 2 years. Agent Gaines, it's time. Dinner tonight at 7. You'll have everything you need. Have you ever watched someone walk into a trap they built for themselves? Because in 3 hours, Marco's perfect plan will detonate in his face, and everyone in that dining room will have blood on their hands. The question isn't who survives. It's who deserves to. At 6:47 p.m., the dining room looked like a scene from a Renaissance painting. Crystal chandeliers, a table that seated 20, china worth more than most people's cars. But beneath the elegance, the air crackled with violence waiting to erupt. Cecilia sat at the far end, next to her mother. Low status. Servant placement. Exactly where Marco wanted them. Isolated, visible, vulnerable. Domenico presided at the head, flanked by Marco on his right and Giuliano on his left. Positions of trust. For now, 8 soldati lined the walls. For loyal to Marco, for to Domenico. Nobody knew which was which. That was the point. The first course was served. Silence thick enough to choke on. Marco cleared his throat. Domenico, there's something we need to discuss. As a family. Domenico's fork paused midair. Continue. We have a traitor among us. Marco's voice carried across the room. Someone who's been selling us to the federal government. And I have proof. Every eye turned. Cecilia felt her mother's hand grip hers beneath the table. Crushing, terrified. Marco stood, pulled out his phone, projected images onto the wall. Bank statements showing federal payments to an account linked to Astrid. Text messages, surveillance photos. Astrid Novak. FBI informant. Codename Sparrow. Active for 3 years. Gasps rippled through the room. Soldati shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Astrid stood, shaking. That's not. Those are fake. Are they? Marco's smile was a blade. Then explain the burner phone we found in your quarters. Explain the encrypted messages. Explain why your daughter was in Domenico's office asking questions. She wasn't asking questions. She's 9 years old. She's 9 years old and very observant. Marco turned to Domenico. With your permission, I'd like to question the child. See what she knows. See what her mother taught her to report. But Domenico had been waiting for this exact moment. For 3 hours, he'd let Marco build his case, fabricate his evidence, dig his own grave. Now it was time to bury him in it. Actually, Domenico said, his voice cutting through the chaos, I have questions of my own. He pulled out the two folders, placed them side by side on the table. Marco, would you like to explain why you switched these yesterday morning? The room went silent. Marco's face, practiced, controlled, flickered for just a second, long enough to betray him. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Domenico opened the forged will. Then explain your fingerprints on this document. Explain why this forgery was created in your law office. Explain why it transfers my empire to you and Giuliano. Giuliano lunged from his seat, not at Domenico, at Marco. You said he wouldn't find out. You said the girl didn't see anything. Shut up. Marco hissed. Too late. The confession was out. The trap was sprung. Domenico's soldati, the four actually loyal to him, drew weapons simultaneously, trained on Marco and Giuliano. Sit. Down. But Marco didn't sit. He reached into his jacket, and that's when everything exploded. Sirens wailed outside. Blue lights flooded the windows. Battering rams hit the front door. Federal agents in tactical gear swarmed like locusts. FBI. Nobody move. Cecilia's world tilted. Her mother pulled her to the floor as gunfire erupted. Giuliano drawing his knife, soldati firing, crystal shattering, blood spraying across Italian marble. Through the chaos, Cecilia saw three things. Marco trying to flee, tackled by agents. Giuliano fighting, subdued, cuffed, screaming. Domenico, hands raised, face calm, letting them take him. Because he'd orchestrated all of it. And in that moment, Cecilia understood. She hadn't saved anyone. She'd been a pawn in a game where even the king played to lose. But the game wasn't over. Because clutched in her mother's coat was a note that would rewrite everything they thought they knew. Comment shocked if you saw the double cross coming, or surprised if Domenico's plan shocked you. Because the real twist is still coming. Federal agents swarmed the penthouse like ants on spilled sugar, photographing evidence, bagging weapons, zip-tying wrists. Cecilia and Astrid huddled in a corner, paramedics checking them for injuries they didn't have. Agent Rebecca Gaines, 47, sharp-eyed, no nonsense, knelt beside them. You're safe now. Both of you. Astrid didn't look safe. She looked shattered. How did you know to come? Cecilia's voice was small, confused. Gaines glanced at Astrid. Your mother's been working with us for 3 years. She's the reason we have a case. Cecilia turned to her mother, betrayal flooding her chest. You've been lying to me for 3 years. To protect you. You put us in danger. You made me live with murderers while I saved us from homelessness. Astrid's voice cracked. Your surgery cost $47,000. We were drowning. The FBI offered a way out. I took it. Cecilia's mind reeled. Everything was a lie. Their life, their safety, her mother's fear, all scripted by federal agents playing chess with their lives. Agent Gaines stood. We need to debrief you both. Separate rooms. Standard protocol. No. Cecilia's voice surprised even herself. We stay together. Gaines studied the 9-year-old who just brought down a Mafia dynasty. All right. Together. They were escorted to an FBI van, leather seats, tinted windows, armed agents, and driven to a field office downtown. In the back seat, Cecilia felt something crinkle in her mother's coat pocket. A note. Folded. Old. She pulled it out while Astrid stared blankly out the window, lost in 3 years of secrets collapsing. The note was in Italian, but Cecilia had heard enough Italian in 3 years to recognize keywords. Astrid Novak. Informant. Code. Sparrow. Handler. Domenico Teresi. Wait. What? She read it again. Slower. Domenico Teresi wasn't just cooperating with the FBI. He'd recruited Astrid himself. He'd hired her 3 years ago, not as a housekeeper, but as his personal insurance policy against internal betrayal. He'd paid her debt through an FBI front. He'd positioned her to monitor Marco and Giuliano. He'd used both the feds and his own family as pawns in a game only he understood. Cecilia's whisper hadn't triggered his plan. It had confirmed it. She'd been the final piece of evidence he needed to move. Mama. Her voice shook. Did you know Domenico hired you? Astrid turned, saw the note, went white. Where did you get that? Your coat. Did you know? Astrid's hands trembled. Agent Gaines told me I was hired as part of an FBI operation. She said Domenico didn't know I was a plant. But Agent Gaines had lied. Because Domenico had been playing both sides for 5 years. feeding the FBI enough to stay valuable, protecting his empire while eliminating internal threats, using federal resources to clean his own house. The van stopped at the field office. As they were escorted inside, Cecilia realized something that turned her stomach. Everyone had used them. Marco, Giuliano, the FBI, Domenico. All of them saw a 9-year-old and her mother's chess pieces, not people. And the only reason they were alive was because Cecilia's innocence made her the perfect witness. Too young to bribe, too scared to lie, too observant to miss anything. Comment hero if you think Domenico saved them, or villain if you think he endangered them. Because in 12 hours, they'll learn what he really planned for them, and whether survival is the same as being saved. The interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and lies. Cecilia sat across from Agent Gaines, her mother beside her, both exhausted and wired. "Let me make sure I understand," Gaines said, pen poised over a notepad. "You saw Marco Teresi swap 2 folders during a meeting. You reported this to Domenico. He then orchestrated tonight's confrontation to expose the conspiracy. Is that correct?" Cecilia nodded. "And you had no idea your mother was working for the FBI?" "No. Or that Domenico Teresi was a confidential informant." "Wait, what?" Astrid's head snapped up. "Domenico was what?" Gaines leaned back, studying them both. "Domenico Teresi has been cooperating with the FBI for 5 years. He's provided intelligence on 3 rival families, prevented 4 interstate murders, and helped us dismantle 2 trafficking operations. Tonight was the culmination of a long-term operation to remove internal threats, Marco and Giuliano, without triggering a mob war." Cecilia's mind spun. "So he used us. Both of us. He used everyone." Gaines didn't sound apologetic. "That's what makes him valuable. He thinks like them and like us. He's the reason we could make arrests tonight without massive civilian casualties. He put my daughter in danger." Astrid's voice shook with fury. "He gave your daughter a chance to expose traitors, which she did. Brilliantly." Gaines turned to Cecilia. "You're a hero, kid. Your testimony will put Marco and Giuliano away for life." Hero. The word felt wrong. Heroes chose their battles. Cecilia had been shoved into the arena and told to fight or die. But what Agent Gaines didn't tell them, what she couldn't tell them yet, was that Domenico's cooperation came with a price. He demanded 3 things: immunity for certain past crimes, protection for specific family members, and a trust fund for Cecilia Novak, paid from seized assets. $2.3 million. Clean money. Government sanitized. Blood money or gratitude. Even Gaines wasn't sure. "What happens to us now?" Astrid asked. "Witness protection. New identities, new city, new lives. You'll be relocated within 48 hours. And Domenico, house arrest pending trial. Cooperation agreement means reduced sentence, probably 7 years, out in 5. He'll live. Unlike the 17 people Giuliano had buried. Unlike the families Marco had destroyed with forged documents and legal manipulation." Cecilia spoke, her voice quiet but sharp. "Did he plan this from the beginning? When he hired my mother?" Gaines hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. He knew Marco and Giuliano were planning a coup. He needed an internal observer they wouldn't suspect. Your mother was perfect, desperate, invisible, motivated to stay quiet. And me?" Cecilia's eyes burned. "Was I part of the plan?" "No. You were. An unexpected advantage. Your photographic memory, your observational skills, those made you invaluable. So I wasn't a person. I was a tool." The silence in that room was heavier than handcuffs. Gaines didn't deny it. Couldn't. Because in this world, FBI, Mafia, justice, revenge, everyone was a tool. The only question was who wielded you and what they built with your sacrifice. Outside the interrogation room, through one-way glass, Domenico Teresi sat in another room, hands cuffed, face calm. He'd lost his empire, but saved his life. Lost his family, but gained his freedom. Sacrificed 2 pieces to protect the king. And when he looked up at that one-way glass, knowing they were watching, he smiled. Because he'd won, and they all knew it. Comment mercy if you think Domenico deserved mercy, or prison if you think he should rot in prison. Because the line between justice and revenge is about to blur beyond recognition. 3 hours after the raid, the penthouse was a crime scene frozen in time. Shattered crystal catching fluorescent light, Blood smears on $90,000 Italian marble. Bullet holes in Renaissance paintings worth millions. Marco sat in federal custody. Lawyer already called. Strategy already forming. He'd play the victim. Manipulated by Giuliano. Afraid for his life. Cooperating fully. Narcissists always thought they could talk their way out. Giuliano, in contrast, said nothing. Sat silent, stone-faced, already calculating which prison gang would offer protection, which connections he could leverage, which guard could be bribed. Lifers learn patience. But the real chaos was happening in a hospital room 3 blocks away. Teresa, the housekeeper who'd asked Cecilia if she was okay, had been shot in the crossfire. One stray bullet, fired by a panicked soldado, had clipped her shoulder. Non-fatal, but traumatic. Cecilia insisted on visiting. Against FBI advice, against her mother's protests. She was kind to me. I need to see her. Agent Gaines relented. Supervised visit. 5 minutes. Teresa lay in a hospital bed, arm in a sling, eyes red from crying. When Cecilia entered, she flinched. "I'm sorry," Cecilia whispered. "This is my fault." "No." Teresa's voice was hoarse. "It's Marco's fault. Giuliano's fault. Men who play God with other people's lives. But if I hadn't said anything, then they would have killed Domenico and started a war. Hundreds dead, including you and your mother." Teresa reached out her good hand. "You saved us, Pequena. Don't let anyone tell you different." Cecilia took her hand, tears finally breaking free. For 3 days, she'd been too scared to cry, too focused on survival. Now, in this sterile room with a woman who barely knew her but defended her anyway, the dam broke. "I'm so tired," she sobbed. "I just want to be normal." Normal is overrated. Teresa smiled through her own tears. "Brave is better. And you, little one, are the bravest person I've ever met. But bravery has a cost." And Cecilia was about to learn that surviving doesn't mean healing. As they left the hospital, Astrid received a text from Agent Gaines. Giuliano's cousins in Sicily had been notified of arrests. "Expect retaliation attempts. Expediting your relocation. Pack tonight. Gone by dawn." The Mafia's reach was long. Even in custody, Giuliano's network could order hits, pay bounties, hunt witnesses. Cecilia and Astrid weren't just survivors. They were targets. And the scariest part? They'd spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, wondering if the next stranger was an assassin, if the next car held a gunman, if safety was ever more than an illusion. Because in this world, there are no clean escapes, only different cages. Comment safe if you think witness protection will save them, or hunted if you think they'll never truly be free. Because the next chapter reveals a threat even the FBI didn't see coming. The war is over, but the haunting has just begun. 48 hours after the raid, 3 interrogation rooms across the federal building held 3 very different stories. Room A, Marco Teresi. "I was manipulated," Marco insisted, lawyer beside him in a $5,000 suit. "Giuliano convinced me Domenico was losing his grip, becoming dangerous. I thought I was protecting the family." Agent Gaines didn't blink. "You forged a will. 14 months of planning. That's not protection. That's premeditated theft. I never intended violence. That was all Giuliano. Classic. Blame the underboss. Play the educated nephew who got in over his head." But the forensic evidence didn't lie. Marco's fingerprints on the forged documents, his law office's paper stock, his encrypted messages planning Domenico's accidental death. Room B, Giuliano Calabrese. Silence. For 6 hours straight, Giuliano sat with arms crossed, jaw set, eyes dead. The old school code. Say nothing, admit nothing, let the lawyers do the talking. But his lawyer had already seen the evidence. "They have you on conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, forgery. You're looking at life without parole." Giuliano's only response: "Then I guess I'll die in prison." No remorse, no fear, just acceptance. Room C, Astrid Novak. "How long have you known Domenico was using me?" Astrid demanded, exhaustion making her voice raw. Agent Gaines leaned back. "Since the beginning. He approached us 5 years ago, offered cooperation. Part of his deal was planting an observer inside his household, someone to monitor Marco and Giuliano without raising suspicion. So you lied to me for 3 years. We gave you immunity, financial security, and protection. You got what you needed. At what cost? My daughter witnessed murders being planned. She'll have nightmares for the rest of her life. Gaines's face softened, barely. She's alive. That's more than most witnesses get in these situations. But here's what none of them knew. Domenico, in a fourth room, was negotiating the final terms of his cooperation deal. 7 years minimum sentence, full immunity for certain past crimes, and one non-negotiable demand. A $2.3 million trust fund for Cecilia Novak, untouchable until she turned 18, paid from seized Teresi assets. When Gaines brought Astrid the paperwork to review, she stared at the number. Why would he do this? Guilt, gratitude, strategy. With Domenico, it's always all three. Astrid's hand trembled over the signature line. Accept blood money for her daughter's future, or refuse and struggle with poverty while running from Sicilian assassins. There are no clean choices when you survive a war you never chose to fight. She signed. Come and take if you'd take the money, or refuse if you'd refuse on principle, because Cecilia will have to live with this decision for the rest of her life. 8 months later, 3 courtrooms delivered 3 different fates. Marco Teresi. The prosecution presented 847 pages of evidence, forged documents, financial records, encrypted messages, testimony from 17 witnesses, including Domenico himself. Marco's lawyer argued coercion, fear, diminished capacity. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the judge read the sentence, 25 years, eligible for parole in 17, Marco's face crumpled. The charming nephew, the Harvard lawyer, the man who quoted Dante, reduced to a number in an orange jumpsuit. Cecilia watched from the gallery, her mother beside her. She felt no triumph, just exhaustion. Giuliano Calabrese. He refused a plea deal. Went to trial. Represented the old code of silence, even as evidence buried him. 17 murders confirmed, 43 suspected. Testimony from former soldati who turned state's evidence to save themselves. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty. Life without parole. As they let him out, Giuliano looked directly at Cecilia in the gallery. Not angry. Almost respectful. A nod so subtle only she caught it. Acknowledgement. She'd beaten him, and he knew it. Domenico Teresi. Cooperation agreement accepted. 7-year sentence for racketeering and conspiracy, to be served under house arrest, due to extraordinary cooperation with federal law enforcement. Translation. He'd given them 3 rival families, prevented 4 murders, dismantled 2 trafficking rings. The feds needed him more than they needed justice. When Cecilia saw him being escorted out, no handcuffs, just ankle monitor, their eyes met. He didn't smile, didn't apologize, just gave a single nod. You saved my life. I saved yours. We're even. But they weren't even. Not remotely. 3 men. 3 sentences. 1 9-year-old girl who'd triggered the collapse of an empire. And as the courtroom emptied, Cecilia realized something that would haunt her. Justice had been served, but nobody felt satisfied. Marco was broken, but alive. Giuliano was caged, but unrepentant. Domenico was punished, but victorious. Winning feels different when you realize everyone lost something irreplaceable. Outside, reporters swarmed. The girl who broke the Mafia, they called her. Cecilia hated that nickname. She wasn't a hero. She was a survivor. There's a difference. Comment justice if you think justice was served, or loss if you think everyone lost. Because the trials are over, but the trauma is just beginning. 1 year after the verdicts, witness protection, undisclosed location. Cecilia woke screaming at 3:47 a.m. Same nightmare. Every time. Marco's eyes locking onto hers, the folder sliding across glass, Giuliano's hand reaching for his ankle knife, gunfire shattering crystal. Astrid rushed in, she always did, and held her daughter until the shaking stopped. This was their new normal. 3 nights a week minimum, sometimes more. They lived in a small house now. 2 bedrooms, vinyl siding, a lawn Astrid pretended to care about. Their new names were Paige and Rebecca Fletcher. New city, new school, new identities built on lies. Cecilia, Paige, was 10 now. In 5th grade. Couldn't tell anyone about her past. Couldn't make real friends because friendship required truth. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Where did you live before? Ohio. Lie. What do your parents do? My mom's a librarian. Half-truth. Why did you move? My dad passed away. Convenient fiction, the FBI provided. But trauma doesn't care about new identities. The nightmares followed her to this beige house in this anonymous suburb. So did the hypervigilance, checking exits in every room, cataloging every stranger's face, flinching at loud noises. Her therapist, Dr. Reeves, called it PTSD, child witness trauma, gave her worksheets about safe spaces and grounding techniques. None of it worked when she woke up at 3 a.m. convinced Marco was in her closet. Astrid struggled too. Guilt consumed her. Guilt for taking the FBI job, for exposing Cecilia to danger, for lying for 3 years. She took antidepressants now, saw her own therapist, tried to hold it together for her daughter while falling apart inside. At 6:15 a.m., Cecilia sat at the breakfast table, pushing cereal around a bowl. Mama, do you think we'll ever feel normal again? Astrid wanted to lie, to promise healing, to be the mother who fixed everything. But she'd learned, lies were what got them here. I don't know, baby, but we're alive. We're together. That's something. Survival isn't the same as living. But sometimes, survival is all you get. At school, Cecilia watched other kids laugh, gossip, stress over tests and crushes, problems that felt like luxuries. She'd never be that carefree again. You can't unsee what she'd seen. Can't unknow what she knew about how easily people destroy each other. But then, during lunch, something unexpected. A girl named Zoe sat beside her. You knew, right? Want to sit with us? Cecilia hesitated. Friendship meant questions. Questions meant lies. Lies meant distance. But maybe distance was worse than risk. Sure, her first real smile in months. Small victories. That's how you rebuild a life. One tiny choice at a time. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after something broke you? Comment rebuild if you know that fight. Because Cecilia's about to learn that healing isn't linear. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. 6 months into their new life, the letter arrived. No return address. Postmarked from Newark, New Jersey. Astrid's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, a single sentence in Italian. I debiti essi ereditano. Debts are inherited. Astrid's blood turned to ice. She called Agent Gaines immediately. Someone knows where we are. Gaines arrived within 2 hours, analyzed the letter, ran forensics. It's a scare tactic. Giuliano's cousins in Sicily trying to intimidate you. They don't have your actual location. They're fishing. How did they get close enough to mail this to our area? Probably hired a PI to narrow down your region, then sent letters to multiple addresses, hoping one would land. It doesn't mean you're compromised, but the damage was done. Safety was an illusion again. That night, Cecilia found her mother staring out the window, curtains drawn, hand gripping a kitchen knife. Mama, go back to bed, baby. Are they coming for us? Astrid turned, and Cecilia saw the truth in her eyes. They would never be truly safe. Not while Giuliano's network existed. Not while the Teresi name carried weight. Not while memories of betrayal fueled Sicilian vengeance codes that lasted generations. We're protected. The FBI. The FBI can't stop everyone. You said so yourself. Astrid pulled Cecilia close. Then we stay smart. Stay alert. Stay together. But that night, Astrid made a decision she didn't tell her daughter about. She called a number she wasn't supposed to have. A burner phone, one use only, connected to a man in house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor in a Manhattan penthouse. It's me, she whispered. They sent a letter. Your people are hunting us. Domenico's voice was calm, unsurprised. I know. I heard. It's being handled. Ow, I still have leverage in Sicily. Messages are being sent. You're off limits. Permanently. Why would they listen to you? You're in federal custody. Because I'm still breathing. And as long as I am, I'm still dangerous. Domenico Teresi's shadow stretched long. Even from a cage, he could protect them. Or destroy them. The line was razor thin. There's a price, he added. The trust fund for Cecilia. She needs to accept it. Use it. That's the message to my world. She's under my aegis. Blood money. Protection bought with stolen wealth. Astrid closed her eyes. I'll tell her. Comment accept if you think they should take his protection, or refuse if you think it's too dangerous. Because in 2 days, Domenico's promise will be tested, and blood will be the price of safety. At 2:47 a.m., Cecilia's phone rang. The burner phone Agent Gaines had given them for emergencies only. She answered, heart hammering. Paige, or do you prefer Cecilia? The voice stopped her breath. Domenico, how did you get this number? I have friends. Listen carefully. Giuliano's cousin, Antonio Calabrese, hired 2 men to find you. They're in your city. You have maybe 6 hours before they narrow your location. Terror flooded her. The FBI said we were safe. The FBI is bureaucratic. I'm practical. Pack essentials. There's a car 3 blocks north. Black Honda. Keys under the driver's mat. Drive to coordinates I'm texting you. Safe house. Off the books. You'll be protected. Why are you helping us? Because you saved my life. I pay my debts. Cecilia's voice hardened. You used me. Yes. And you're alive because I did. Now let me keep you that way. The line went dead. Astrid appeared in the doorway, already dressed. Who was that? Domenico. He says there are men coming. We need to leave. They had a choice. Trust the FBI's official protection, or trust a Mafia boss's unofficial network. Astrid made the call to Agent Gaines. Voicemail. It was 3 a.m. Bureaucracy slept. Assassins didn't. We go. Astrid decided. Grab your bag. 10 minutes later, they were in the black Honda, Cecilia navigating to coordinates that led to a cabin 2 hours north. Remote. Off-grid. Stocked with supplies. As dawn broke, they sat in that cabin, exhausted and wired, when Cecilia's phone buzzed. A news alert. 2 men arrested attempting to breach witness protection safe house. FBI thwarts assassination attempt. The house they just fled. The FBI had been watching, ready to intercept. Domenico had known. But he'd also known the FBI's response time would have been too slow if the killers had arrived 5 minutes earlier. So he'd gotten them out first. He'd saved them. Again, using illegal methods that protected them better than legal ones. Cecilia stared at her phone, at the $2.3 million trust fund paperwork Astrid had finally shown her. If we take his money, we're tied to him forever, Cecilia said. If we don't take it, we're poor targets instead of protected ones. There are no clean choices when your safety depends on the man who endangered you in the first place. Cecilia signed the paperwork, accepted the blood money, became tied to Domenico Teresi's legacy, whether she liked it or not. But I'm going to use it differently, she whispered. I'm going to use it to help kids like me. And that's when the idea was born, the Witness Project. Calm and protect if you think Domenico is protecting them, or manipulate if you think he's still manipulating them. Because the line between savior and puppeteer is about to disappear completely. 6 months later, Cecilia, still going by Paige at school, but Cecilia in her heart, stood in a lawyer's office, Astrid beside her, as they signed the paperwork that would change everything. The Witness Project, a nonprofit foundation providing legal, financial, and psychological support to children who witness organized crime. Funded by the $2.3 million trust fund. Run by professionals, Cecilia and Astrid as anonymous benefactors, their real identities protected. The lawyer, Ms. Hernandez, smiled. This is incredibly mature for someone your age. Most 11-year-olds wouldn't think about using money this way. Most 11-year-olds don't know what it's like to watch people plan murders over espresso, Cecilia replied, voice flat. Ms. Hernandez's smile faded. Fair point. But what Cecilia didn't tell her, what she could never tell anyone, was that Domenico had sent a letter suggesting exactly this. Not ordering. Suggesting. Planting the seed. If you must carry my shadow, make it cast light instead of darkness. Even from house arrest, he was shaping her choices. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd seen something in her that she was only now discovering. The ability to transform trauma into purpose. The first family they helped. A 12-year-old boy named Carlos whose uncle was a cartel enforcer. Carlos had witnessed 3 murders and was being pressured to join the organization. The Witness Project provided legal representation, therapy, and relocation funds. Saved his life. By the end of the first year, 23 families helped. Cecilia kept a photo of each child on a private wall in her room. Faces she'd never meet, lives she'd never directly touch, but futures she'd help secure. Astrid watched her daughter transform from traumatized victim to fierce advocate, and felt something unexpected, pride mixed with heartbreak. You should be playing with dolls, Astrid whispered one night. Not saving other kids from the life we escaped. I can't be that kid anymore, Mama. So I might as well be this one. Healing isn't returning to who you were before. It's becoming who you have to be after. At school, Paige joined a book club, made a real friend, Zoe, who knew nothing about her past but sensed something deeper. They talked about normal things, homework, boys, music, and for brief moments, Cecilia remembered what it felt like to be just a kid. But then the nightmares would return. The balance between normal and broken was fragile, held together by therapy sessions and Astrid's unwavering presence and the knowledge that 23 other children were breathing easier because of her pain. Small victories, slow healing, one day at a time. And then, 2 years after the trials, Cecilia received an invitation that would force her to face her past one final time. Comment forgive if you think she should forgive Domenico, or never if some wounds can't heal, because what happens next will test whether redemption is possible for anyone. 5 years after the raid, Cecilia, age 15. The Criminal Justice Reform Conference filled a hotel ballroom with 300 people, lawyers, FBI agents, prosecutors, advocates. Cecilia had been invited to speak, anonymously, face blurred on screens, voice modulated, about the child witness perspective in organized crime cases. Astrid sat in the back row, nervous, proud, terrified. Cecilia took the podium, invisible behind technology, but finally ready to speak her truth. I was 9 years old when I saw 2 men plan a murder. I was 9 when I chose to speak instead of staying silent. And I've spent the last 5 years learning that courage and trauma aren't opposites, they're twins. She talked about fear, about invisibility, about the cost of witnessing. No names, no specific details, but anyone who'd followed the Teresi case recognized the story. Standing ovation, not for bravery, for survival. As she left the stage, a man approached. Older, gray hair, 2 federal agents flanking him. Supervised release. Astrid stepped between them instantly. Mrs. Novak. Or is it Fletcher now? Domenico Teresi. 5 years older, thinner, but still carrying that aura of controlled danger. What are you doing here? Astrid's voice shook with rage. I was invited. Panel on informant rehabilitation and reintegration. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I heard about your foundation. 289 children helped in 5 years. Impressive. Cecilia stepped forward. Don't pretend you're proud. You used me. I did. And you used that experience to save others. Which of us made the better choice with what we were given? The question hung like a blade. You put me in danger. I gave you agency in a world designed to make you powerless. You're a criminal. And you're a hero because of it. Cecilia's jaw tightened. I'm not a hero. I'm a survivor. And I survived despite you. Not because of you. Domenico nodded slowly. You're right. But you learned something from me that night. How to think strategically, how to weaponize truth, how to survive when every choice is dangerous. I don't need forgiveness. I need you to acknowledge that. And here was the terrible truth Cecilia didn't want to admit. He was right. She had learned from him. The monster had taught her how to fight monsters. That didn't make him good. But it made the situation unbearably complex. Your mother saved you by lying to you. Domenico continued. I saved you by telling you the hard truths. Neither of us deserves forgiveness. But you deserved better than both of us. Astrid pulled Cecilia away. We're done here. But before they left, Cecilia turned back. You're right. I did deserve better. But I got you both. And I survived anyway. Not because of you, in spite of you. She walked away, head high, leaving Domenico standing there. The man who'd lost everything but convinced himself he'd won. Because that's what monsters do. They rewrite history to make themselves the heroes. Outside the conference, Cecilia took a shaky breath. Astrid held her hand. Did you mean it? That you survived in spite of us? No, Mama. You saved me. Every day. You just complicated everything. That's what dangerous men do. They complicate love until you can't tell what's real. And in that moment, Cecilia understood, some people can't be forgiven. They can only be survived. And survival is its own form of victory. Comment 1 if you think Cecilia won, or lost if you think everyone lost, because the final chapter will reveal what healing actually looks like when you can't erase the past.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.